Hey there guys, welcome to today's live stream. So as far as like I usually do with each of these live streams, I usually try to announce anything that's coming up. So I do want to mention that I am planning on doing another sort of 14-day challenge, basically to invite more people to try out my program for 14 days and to see how they like the program. So I don't have that exactly set up yet, but that's coming here soon, specifically for spring. So I will share that here in the near future when you can join that. Again, when I do these 14-day challenges, I do different things happen. I do change it up a bit with different stuff, but the main sort of foundation of it is that you get to try my program for 14 days for free. It's a free trial, but you don't have to have any payment method when you do it. When it ends, it ends. And then after that, basically, you'll have a program for your specific goal. You'll have access to everything that's in the program that I have to offer, and you'll be able to do that program. And then at the end, I'll basically talk to you one on one and get an idea of how you like the program, if you felt like it was helpful, and if you would like to continue on and to sort of make a commitment to go further, basically, with your fitness goals. So that'll be coming up soon. I'll share that likely in this group, and then I'll share it, of course, on my Facebook page profile. So I wanted to mention that beforehand. And another thing before I get started with today's presentation, I do want to mention too that on Instagram every Tuesday I've been starting to do more exercise-based live streams. And I really encourage you guys to join those, to sort of check those out, because they're separate, they're different from what I talk about here. So basically what I talk about here on Wednesday is more of basically the knowledge of fitness and the sort of the background of fitness and what you need to do and to keep in mind throughout your day-to-day life. Of course, I talk about various topics, nutrition, like I'm talking about hypertrophy today. So it's various different topics. But what I want to mention is with my Instagram, I've been focusing on exercises, performing a set of exercises that you can try. I'm mostly starting with beginner-based exercises that you can try at home and sort of giving a progression on how you can do those, how you can get started, because I really want to help people who are really starting, beginning with fitness or who are trying to get back into fitness to sort of start at home, something that's easy, that's approachable, where you really don't have to be at the gym to start out, and then just sort of progress from there. So that's sort of what I'm looking to do and what I'm looking to sort of make the primary goal of my Instagram live streams is to cater to that audience and to cater to you guys who are beginners and who are just starting out and sort of learning. And that's what I want to offer. So I encourage you guys to go back. I keep those live streams, I download them, and I do repost them so that you can watch them again. So I've done two. Most of it has been just basic SMR foam rolling exercises, but it is beneficial because they're exercises that you do for warm up and cool downs. So I won't go into detail about all those exercises today because I sort of discussed that yesterday. But I do want to mention that those live streams, you can watch those there on Instagram. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment on those. But this next week, I'm going to do another one. I'm likely going to do some stretches that don't involve any equipment, like with the foam roller. So that's sort of what I'm going to do next week. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with what I'm talking about today. And what we're going to talk about today is hypertrophy. So, hypertrophy is focused on a lot of muscle gain. A lot of the clients that I have focus on muscle gain. So, I sort of want to go a little bit through this type of sort of, topic to sort of give you an idea on how hypertrophy works, what your muscles do during exercise, what your muscles do with recovery, and things of that nature. So that's what I'm going to get into today. So what is muscle hypertrophy? So muscle hypertrophy is ultimately the function of protein balance to synthesize more muscle protein than you break down, and it will help you pack on more muscle size. So there's three different factors when it comes to muscle hypertrophy, and that's mechanical tension, muscle damage, and metabolic stress, which I'm going to discuss a little bit. But again, it's all about, this muscle protein synthesis that happens in your body and sort of you breaking down your muscles, and then your muscles, when you intake protein, it's helping to repair those muscles. So before I move on to the next slide, let's sort of do a little bit of an overview on what the factors of hypertrophy are. So, mechanical tension. So, what mechanical tension means is that it refers to the amount of force developed by your muscle fibers in a response to a stimulus. So, basically, to sum this up, this is basically when you're performing a specific exercise, this is basically when your muscle, how it's reacting to that stimulus, how it's reacting to that movement. Any exercise you're doing, whether you're doing dumbbells, barbells, that's basically what that is that mechanical tension, that force that's being developed by the muscle fibers when you're pulling that weight. And that's basically explaining that that's how the muscle is reacting to that stimulus, is pretty much what mechanical tension means. So muscle damage is basically exercise-induced muscle damage is known to contribute to muscle growth and results from concentric and eccentric muscle actions. I've talked about concentric and eccentric multiple times. Again, it's a big factor in all of this. So, which is the action of muscle shortening and muscle stretching, muscle lengthening and stretching, or muscle tension. So, although chronic inflammation is negative effect on the muscles, the opposite can be said about acute inflammation, otherwise known as sensitive inflammation. So your muscles are going to get damaged when you work out. It's a part of the process. It's a part of that process of lifting weights. It's how your body reacts. It's a part because that muscle damage in turn, like what I talk about muscle protein synthesis, which is basically the process that the body goes through to sort of repair that muscle pretty much. So the muscle damage is done when you're basically performing the exercise. That damage occurs, and then your muscle goes through, with the proper amount of protein, it goes through muscle protein synthesis, which in turn pretty much repairs that muscle. It builds that muscle back up. So that's basically what leads to this hypertrophy and what leads to your muscles growing, is because you're breaking them down, it's building them back up, and it's building them back up bigger as you're going through that process of weightlifting, because you're constantly tearing your muscles down. And especially if you're going through sort of like progressive overload and you're gradually increasing your weight with each exercise, then that's pretty much basically the contributing factor to that muscle growth, is you're doing that progressive overload and you're constantly challenging your muscles, so they have to break down more. So muscle damage is not necessarily a bad thing. However, overtraining is a bad thing, which is another topic in itself. But you would know if you're overtraining, if you're going overboard and you're, really sore for days on end, then that's likely that you've overtrained those muscles. So that's something to keep in mind. So metabolic stress is another factor that goes into this. And basically what metabolic stress is it results in a buildup of various metabolites as a primary result of training in the fast glycolytic energy system. Metabolic stress can promote cell swelling through various mechanisms. Cell swelling has been shown to increase muscle protein synthesis, which I just discussed, or otherwise known as MPS. So muscle protein synthesis, again, it's that big factor that plays into muscle growth. It plays a huge role in that. And that's why I sort of talked about it last week. I didn't remember talking about it because I talked a little bit about supplementation. So that's why I mentioned that when you're taking protein, it's always taken after your workouts. And the reasoning why is because it's for repairing that muscle. It's for basically going into that muscle protein synthesis, helping with that phase to help repair your muscles. So that's why I always mention that protein is usually afterwards, after your workouts, instead of you taking it, before. So going beyond that, so we sort of discussed some of the different factors. So what I'm going to do here is sort of discuss different things as it relates to hypertrophy, different separate factors, I guess you'd say, or other contributors to hypertrophy, basically. So the first thing is genetic factors to hypertrophy. So this is a fact that something that you should keep in mind is that some people naturally do benefit from gaining muscle due to their specific genetics. That can be a fact. One thing that I can actually kind of attest to that in a way because with me, with my family, my dad, he works out too, and our trap muscles, our trapezius muscles, always kind of pop out. His is kind of the same way. And I usually always get asked, why are your traps so big? This and that. And, a lot of times I don't target my traps that often. It's not a muscle I target all the time. But, I do a lot of shoulder workouts too, or, things targeting shoulders, which can contribute to your traps as well. But I've always gotten that asked. But I think that's more of a genetic factor because I don't target that muscle that often. And my dad kind of has that same thing where he does different types of workouts than I do, but that's somewhat of a genetic factor is that, you know, our side or my dad's side of the family kind of have that ability to, mainly build that muscle more than other people. So genetic factors can be a part of hypertrophy. However, it cannot you can still gain muscle regardless of your limitations. It doesn't matter. So studies have shown that while genetically gifted individuals can gain muscle size by at least 50% over the course of a 16-week routine, others can see little, if any, progress in the same time frame. So that's something to keep in mind. So some people can gain muscle faster than others, and some people it just takes a longer time. And that's another thing that can be difficult is to when you're reaching those plateaus is to be aware that just because even though you know that you're putting in the work and you're putting in the effort and you're doing what you need to do, that does not mean that you're not progressing. It just may take you a longer time. It just may take your body a longer time to build that muscle. So that's something to keep in mind. So again, I'm sort of going into sort of different things that sort of influence hypertrophy gain. So maximizing hypertrophy gain. So we're going to talk about training plateaus, unrealistic goals, training diary, mind-muscle connection, and muscle symmetry. So this is all kind of connected to sort of like talking about with um, like what we just discussed with sort of the plateau, training plateau, and sort of those genetic factors. So there's different things to keep in mind when you're going through a program, when you're going through something focused with building muscle, is you have to be aware of so many different barriers that's going to come your way. That thing with genetics, it is a barrier. It is something, it's a barrier, so it is something that you can overcome. It may take longer. It takes a longer period of time. Again, some people build muscle so quick. Like it's within, there's people that can build it within 16 weeks, and then there's some people that just, it may take, a couple months. It just kind of depends on who, your genetics as a person and how much effort you're going into your program. So unrealistic goals is another barrier that we kind of talk about. So when done correctly, a goal setting is done to help increase your overall motivation for exercise as well as build self-esteem. When you have unrealistic goals, this creates less motivation as well as lowering your overall self-esteem. So when you're going to create a goal, and I've sort of discussed this in the back, in the past, talking about SMART goals. Basically, you just want to clearly define the goal that you're going for. So define your goals in a realistic way, being descriptive with your goal that you have in mind. For example, a goal to gain 15 pounds of muscle is unrealistic and it can be potentially considered an unsafe goal. So to gain 15 pounds of muscle, well, let me rephrase that because I've kind of got it worded a little bit off. So a goal to gain 15 pounds of muscle within maybe a month. Let's just say that. So if you're doing something like that, that's going to be way too unsafe, and really it's kind of unrealistic to even get to that amount in that time frame. It's too, there's no way. So you just want to make your goals a little bit more concise, a little bit more, detailed and descriptive. And I've sort of discussed this in the past with SMART goals. So definitely go back and watch that live stream. But it all is all about basically being specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. That's basically what SMART means. And you just want to have basically your goal in mind, sort of outlined in that. So that's something to be aware of. So another thing is being aware of training plateaus. I've dealt with this myself personally with my own journey. So muscle hypertrophy is never really a linear process, and it can be a mental challenge to overcoming training plateaus. So there's various strategies to keep in mind when this arises. Your goal should be about minimizing the length of these specific plateaus. So whenever I started, I know it seems like every time every time I get on these live streams, like whenever I started sort of getting with started getting into more weightlifting, and it was about maybe 4 or 5 months going through it, and I was sort of learning this myself. I didn't really have anybody really helping me, which is why I pursued this. But the reason why, uh, not the reason why, but why I kind of went through this plateau at about 5 months, 5 or 6 months, somewhere in that time frame, where I was working out pretty much every day. Like it was almost 7 days a week when I'd started, which is way too much, like I mentioned in the past. But I was doing these workouts. I was pretty consistent. I was, sort of doing a training split each day. The only problem with, really, I think the reason why I kind of hit a plateau because I wasn't doing the proper recovery. That's, looking back at it, I think that's what it was, because I was so focused on getting muscle, gaining that muscle. I was like, maybe if I just do it straight up, just go full force with it, that I can gain muscle fast. But your body doesn't work that way. You've got to recover. Your body has to repair. It has to have that rest time. So I was sort of getting frustrated because I wasn't. I mean, I was like sore every day, but I wasn't sort of seeing those results. And I was like, okay, I just gotta sort of have to get over this. I just need to keep doing it, because if I stop, then nothing's gonna happen. If I just stop here and don't try, I'm gonna be back to where I was 6 months prior. So I just kind of had to tell myself, okay, just stick with it. Just keep staying with it, and eventually it'll come. It'll come. So as I kept going, and over the past couple of years, I've sort of noticed how much of a difference I've made, how much weight that I've gained, as far as muscle weight, I guess you would say. So you just kind of have to, put your mind in a place to where this stuff is not, it's not a straight line. It's not something that you're going to have barriers, but you got to sort of understand that when those come up, that you just need to keep going. You need to keep going, and you need to think, okay, where I'm at right now, I made it 6 months to this point. If I stop today, then I'll be back to where I was 6 months prior. So you sort of have to think of it in that way. You have to change sort of your mindset. And I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but this goes hand in hand with talking about SMART goals. But you just gotta have that mindset as to, I just gotta keep pushing on. You know, I think I've seen a picture where it shows somebody like rolling a ball like up a hill, and it says this is pointless, trying to get to their goal. And then right at that ending spot where they stopped is where they actually reached their goal. So that's basically what it is. Is that something you have to keep in mind? is when you think you're the farthest away from a goal is when you're actually the closest. So I think that's a good way to sort of see it. So another thing as well is to keep track of a training diary. So basically what this goes hand in hand with what I just talked about, overcoming these plateaus and overcoming or basically setting those realistic goals or those smart goals in mind. So going along with goal setting as well as training plateaus, building a training diary can help with keeping yourself accountable and charting every aspect of the workout you perform. This includes specific exercises as well as the sets and reps that are performed. And this is basically how my clients do their sort of progress. But it's more, of course, it's online. So it's the same sort of concept where they have all their stuff. They just need to mark that it's complete. They did this set of reps and they did this set of sets. It's basically the same sort of thing, except they're keeping the training diary online in a sense. So, and this is a good thing to keep in mind. This gives you a great structure, especially, just sort of keep being aware of sort of each workout that you've done, being aware of your training splits, like if you're working out back and biceps, chest, triceps. This is really good to sort of be aware because sometimes when you get used to sort of doing your workouts, you sort of get to a point to, if you're not tracking them, you get to a point where like, I don't even remember what I did yesterday, or I can't, because you're getting into the motion of doing so many workouts, you can't remember. So that's another thing that can help with is that you kind of know where you're at, what muscles need to be targeted this day, and sort of where you need to progress from there. And so another thing, of course, is, I sort of talked about that progressive overload. If you're doing a set of workouts and they're just becoming really easy, then that's the time where you need to start challenging yourself. Maybe you need to add more sets. Maybe you need to add more reps. Maybe you need to do a progression of that specific workout. So that's something to keep in mind. Is a training diary can be a great thing. You can, of course, write it down, or you can do it online. And again, like with my clients, they basically have a training diary online the way that works because they're sort of keeping track of their progress through my program. So again, this is a great thing to do as well. Alrighty, so that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I hope that you found some value from this. I hope that it helps. I love talking about this type of stuff because I think it's really interesting. I've learned a lot myself as far as before I started, being a personal trainer, and then after, I've kind of noticed the difference in sort of the knowledge and what it takes to sort of get to your desired goal and your desired outcome. And it's not a straight line. It's never going to be a straight line, and that's something to keep in mind that it just takes time. You just progress. You just constantly, it's like 1% better each day. You just constantly are doing the things that work, doing the things consistently, challenging yourself. When you get comfortable, it's time to challenge yourself. That's another thing to keep in mind. And that's how this, muscle growth works. That's how all of this works. It's all a process of consistency. So thank you guys for taking the time to watch this. If you have any questions about anything I discussed today, any other live stream, even Instagram live streams that I'm doing, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is brandonparton95@gmail.com, and then my phone number is 931-434-6880. If you have questions about anything, or if you want to learn more about our program, or any sort of offers, whether it be about the 14-day challenges that I do, or anything else, any other questions that you have, I'm willing to answer those to anybody. It's just about giving you guys knowledge, just about sort of teaching you the importance of your health, of your fitness, of, just creating a better quality of life. So that's mainly my goal and what I want to achieve as a trainer. So thank you guys for watching, and I will have another live stream next Wednesday as I usually do. The next one, the closest one, will be on Tuesday on Instagram. I don't have the specific exercises that we'll be performing, but it's likely going to be some exercises that are easy to do that you can try at home. So definitely watch that when it comes up and watch the previous ones as well because there's a lot of good information from those. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next live stream.